Some crimes defy every expectation of what a heist can be. Across American history, thieves have plotted to steal not just cash and jewels, but molasses, secret recipes, and even human remains. We are about to explore 33 of the most peculiar thefts ever attempted, a journey into the strange intersection of audacity and absurdity. You will hear true stories of a skyjumper who vanished into thin air, a multi-million-dollar robbery foiled by paper fakes, and a Thanksgiving ruined by 50 missing pies. How does a disaster become an opportunity for theft, and what drives someone to hold a coffin for ransom? These are not just tales of crime, but fascinating glimpses into human ingenuity at its most bizarre. What do you believe is the most important ingredient for a truly unforgettable heist? The sheer strangeness of criminal ambition has no better opening act than a disaster that unfolded in the heart of Boston. On a strangely warm January afternoon in 1919, a monstrous tank containing over 2.3 million gallons of molasses ruptured. A wave of sticky syrup, estimated to be over 15 feet high, surged through the streets at 35 miles per hour. It was a horrifying event, crushing buildings, overturning a train, and claiming 21 lives. But in the chaotic, tragic aftermath, as the city struggled with the unthinkable cleanup, a different kind of activity began. Looters, armed with buckets and containers, allegedly descended upon the wrecked waterfront warehouses. While rescue workers fought to free the trapped and the dead, these opportunists saw not tragedy, but a sweet, if morbid, opportunity. They reportedly siphoned the thick, spilled molasses from the ruins, gathering a strange bounty from the devastation. The motivation was likely twofold. Molasses was a valuable commodity at the time, used for producing rum and as a sweetener. In an era before widespread refrigeration, this accidental windfall, scooped from the ruins of a catastrophe, represented a bizarre and shocking score. It was a heist born from pure chaos, proving that for some, even a wall of syrup could not wash away the temptation for an easy, if utterly strange, profit. Corporate preparedness can sometimes be the most effective security system of all. In 1984, a team of thieves in New York executed what seemed like the perfect crime. They had studied the routines of a Brinks Mat armored truck, identifying a moment of vulnerability. With precision, they intercepted the vehicle and made off with a fortune, or so they believed. The haul was said to contain $8 million in cash and securities. The criminals surely celebrated their incredible luck and flawless planning. But their triumph was shockingly short-lived. Upon opening the secure boxes, they discovered the truth. The contents were not money at all. Instead, they found stacks of perfectly crafted paper replicas, worthless fakes created for a corporate training exercise. The Brinks Mat Company had been running a drill, using these incredibly realistic forgeries to train their guards without the risk of handling real currency. The thieves had not been outsmarted by a security guard or a police sting, but by a company so prepared that even their practice materials were enough to foil a multi-million-dollar heist. It was a humiliating defeat, a crime that turned into a punchline. How could such a detailed plan be undone by something so simple as a training simulation? This bizarre failure serves as a strange testament to the power of foresight, proving that sometimes the most valuable thing a company can steal is a criminal's dignity. Sometimes the most coveted secret is not a jewel but a flavor. In the 1970s, the heart of Kentucky Fried Chicken's empire was not a vault of cash, but a single, unassuming piece of kitchen equipment. Colonel Harland Sanders' original pressure cooker from the 1940s was more than just a pot. It was the legendary gravy boat, the very vessel where his famous recipe of 11 herbs and spices was perfected. This made it a target for corporate spies and desperate competitors who believed it held the literal key to the colonel's success. The heists were as bizarre as they were persistent. Thieves did not just attempt to steal the recipe on paper, they repeatedly targeted the physical gravy boat itself, snatching it from different KFC locations. The logic was simple yet flawed. They assumed that residue inside the aged cooker could be chemically analyzed, finally revealing the secret blend that Sanders guarded so fiercely. Imagine teams of corporate operatives not cracking safes, but sneaking into restaurant kitchens to make off with a well-used piece of cookware. This was industrial espionage played out with the absurdity of a comic caper. The colonel, ever the showman, reportedly found the entire situation somewhat amusing, confident that his secret was safe. After all, the true recipe was locked away in his head and in a secure vault. The repeated thefts of the gravy boat highlight a profound desperation, a belief that success could be stolen like a piece of silver. But can you truly steal a legacy from the bottom of a pot? This strange series of crimes proves that when a legend is involved, even the most mundane object can become the target of an obsessive and ultimately futile quest. The quest for a secret recipe pales next to a crime that literally vanished into thin air. On the night before Thanksgiving in 1971, a man calling himself Dan Cooper purchased a one-way ticket from Portland to Seattle. He was quiet, wearing a business suit and dark sunglasses. Once the plane was in the air, he handed a note to a flight attendant. It stated he had a bomb in his briefcase. His demands were chillingly specific: $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. After the plane landed in Seattle, he released the passengers in exchange for the ransom, then ordered the pilots to take off again, this time heading south towards Mexico. But somewhere over the dark, stormy wilderness of the Pacific Northwest, Cooper did the unthinkable. He lowered the rear staircase of the Boeing 727 and, with the ransom money strapped to his body, jumped into the freezing rain. He was never seen again. For years, the FBI conducted one of the most extensive manhunts in history, yet no trace of Cooper or most of the money was ever reliably found. A small portion of the cash was discovered years later by a boy on a riverbank, but the man himself had simply disappeared. This was not just a theft, it was a perfect escape, the only unsolved case of air piracy in American history. How did one man with no apparent specialized training manage to pull off such an audacious feat and then evaporate without a clue? The legend of D.B. Cooper endures because it is the ultimate mystery, a heist that questions whether the greatest success is not in the theft itself, but in the vanishing act that follows. While a lone skyjumper vanished into myth, another heist was being plotted with brutal, cold-eyed precision. The target was the Lufthansa cargo building at JFK Airport, a hub where immense wealth moved under the assumed safety of darkness. On a freezing December morning in 1978, a team of men connected to the Lucchese crime family put a plan into motion that was chilling in its efficiency. They knew the schedules, the security rounds, and the exact location of a priceless shipment. With the inside help of a cargo worker, they slipped into the building, brandishing weapons and quickly subduing the employees. Their take was staggering: an estimated $5 million in untraceable cash and nearly $900,000 in jewels. It was the largest cash robbery in American history at that time, a seemingly perfect score executed without a single shot fired during the theft itself. The crime was later immortalized in the film Goodfellas, which captured the audacious glamour of the score, but the real-life aftermath was far darker than any movie. The immense success of the heist created a fatal paranoia. The masterminds, fearing informants, began systematically eliminating anyone with knowledge of the crime. Associates, drivers, even close friends began to disappear, their bodies buried in shallow graves or simply never found. The promise of untold wealth curdled into a death sentence for most of those involved. This heist presents a grim contradiction, a flawlessly planned theft that ultimately unraveled not because of police work, but because of the sheer murderous greed it unleashed. It raises a haunting question: can a crime ever be called successful when its greatest cost is measured not in what was taken, but in the lives that were erased to protect the secret? The shadowy paranoia of organized crime stands in stark contrast to a heist of breathtaking cultural loss. In the early hours of March 18, 1990, two men dressed as Boston police officers arrived at the side entrance of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. They buzzed the intercom, claiming they were responding to a report of a disturbance. The two young security guards on duty against all protocol made the fateful decision to let them in. Once inside, the fake officers quickly overpowered the guards, handcuffing them with their own handcuffs and duct tape. For the next 81 minutes, the two thieves had free rein of the palace-turned-museum, moving with a strange mixture of purpose and ignorance. Their haul was both immense and peculiar. They cut two priceless Rembrandt paintings from their frames, including his only seascape, The Storm on the Sea of Galilee. They took a small, exquisite painting by Johannes Vermeer, The Concert, one of only 34 known works by the artist in the entire world. They even snatched a small Chinese bronze beaker from the Shang dynasty. Yet they left behind even more valuable works, seemingly confused about what to take. The total value of the 13 stolen pieces is estimated at over $500 million, making it the largest private property theft in history. The case remains wide open. The art vanished without a trace. Countless leads have evaporated, and a $5 million reward for information has gone unclaimed for decades. Who were these men who so brazenly impersonated authority to steal irreplaceable beauty? And where could 13 world-famous masterpieces simply disappear? This is not just a story of a theft, but a permanent hole in the heart of the art world, a silent crime that continues to taunt investigators and haunt the empty frames that still hang on the museum walls as a solemn promise to never forget. The emptiness of those museum frames echoes a different kind of void, one created not by missing art but by a staggering absence of cash. In 1997, the most impenetrable place in Los Angeles was not a bank, but the Dunbar Armored Depot, a fortress designed to hold hundreds of millions of dollars for circulation. Its greatest vulnerability, however, was not a flaw in its alarms or its vaults, but a man entrusted with its security. Alan Pace was a regional safety inspector for Dunbar, a man who knew every procedure, every camera angle, and every moment when the facility was at its most quiet. He used that privileged knowledge to plan the perfect inside job. On a Friday night, just before the long Labor Day weekend, Pace let himself into the depot with his own key. He had already disabled the internal security systems. Then he opened the door for 5 of his childhood friends who slipped inside. For hours, the 6 men moved through the vaults with calm efficiency, filling laundry bags with bundled cash. Their haul was a record-breaking $18.9 million, mostly in untraceable, small-denomination bills. They left behind no immediate clues, simply locking the door behind them and vanishing into the holiday weekend. The heist was a masterpiece of internal betrayal, so clean that investigators were initially baffled. How could such an immense amount of money simply evaporate from one of the most secure buildings in the city? The answer, it turned out, was not a how but a who. The plan was perfect, but the criminals were not. The crew's discipline lasted for over a year, but such a massive secret is a heavy burden. The first crack appeared when one of the men, Eugene Price, made a fatal mistake. He was pulled over for a traffic violation, and in a moment of sheer arrogance, he tried to bribe the officer with a fresh stack of $100 bills, money that was still bound with Dunbar security straps. That one foolish act unraveled the entire scheme, leading investigators directly to the tight-knit group of friends. It is a stark reminder that the most sophisticated security breach can be undone by the simplest human flaw. A nearly perfect crime, undone not by a master detective, but by a man who could not resist showing off. While the Dunbar heist was a lesson in human error, the the Pierre Hotel robbery was a masterclass in theatrical confidence. On New Year's Eve 1972, as Manhattan's elite celebrated in black tie and diamonds, a team of 8 men arrived at the luxurious Pierre Hotel. They were impeccably dressed, led by a charismatic former fashion model named Bobby Comfort. To any observer, they were simply more wealthy guests. Their plan was as bold as it was simple. They calmly took control of the hotel's security desk, then systematically moved through the halls. Using stolen passkeys, they entered suite after suite, waking sleeping socialites and millionaires. The thieves were not violent, but they were terrifyingly efficient. They bound the guests with cord and adhesive tape, then proceeded to ransack the rooms for cash, jewelry, and valuables. For nearly 2 hours, they operated with calm precision in the heart of one of the world's most exclusive addresses, treating the entire hotel as their personal vault. The take was an estimated $3 million in untraceable gems and money, a fortune stolen from the pockets of the rich as the new year began. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. This was not a stealthy break-in under cover of darkness, but a social invasion, a performance where the thieves played the part of guests until the moment they revealed themselves as predators. How did they maintain such cool composure while moving through a crowded, high-security hotel? Their success lay in their appearance and their timing. They looked like they belonged, and they struck when their victims were at their most vulnerable, distracted by champagne and celebration. It was a heist that proved the best disguise is often the one that requires no mask at all, just the arrogance to walk right through the front door. The theatrical confidence of the Pierre Hotel stands in stark contrast to a heist executed not with social grace, but with the cold precision of a surgical operation. In the quiet, affluent community of Laguna Niguel, California, the United California Bank was considered a fortress, its vault protected by layers of steel and sophisticated alarm systems. But its architects never considered an attack from below. For months, a team of thieves operating under the mysterious alias Dr. X rented a vacant shop 2 doors down from the bank. To any observer, they were simply new business owners preparing to open. Behind the locked doors, however, they were engineers of a grand subterranean scheme. They constructed a false wall inside the shop, creating a hidden chamber from which they began the arduous work of digging a tunnel. This was no crude hole. It was a meticulously engineered passage, shored up with wooden beams and equipped with a ventilation system to supply fresh air. They used a military-grade thermal lance to silently cut through the reinforced concrete of the vault's foundation, a tool so advanced it could slice through metal and stone with minimal noise. Every step was calculated to bypass the bank's defenses, moving underneath the very floor that housed motion sensors and pressure plates. When they finally broke through, their haul was staggering, an estimated $9 to $12 million in cash, securities, and safe deposit box valuables, making it one of the largest cash robberies in American history at the time. The heist was a masterpiece of patience and technical skill, a literal undermining of security that left the bank completely unaware until employees arrived on a Monday morning to find a gaping hole in the vault floor. How do you defend against an enemy you never see, one that works for months in silence right next door? The Dr. X caper proved that the most formidable vault is only as strong as the earth it sits upon, and that true patience can tunnel through any wall. Ambition can sometimes outpace wisdom, especially when the target is the world's tallest building. In 1969, as the Sears Tower began its climb over the Chicago skyline, a group of University of Kansas architecture students hatched a plan of staggering audacity. They were not after cash or jewels, but the very soul of the structure, its architectural blueprints. Their logic was as simple as it was bizarre. They believed the blueprints were so vital to the project that the architects, Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, would pay a $1 million ransom to get them back. How could a group of students possibly get their hands on such sensitive documents? They relied on a surprising advantage. One of their own was interning at the architectural firm. This inside man reportedly smuggled out key documents piece by piece over several weeks, building their illicit collection. The plan was to assemble the complete set and then make their ransom demand, holding the design of a skyscraper hostage. But this was not the plot of a slick Hollywood thriller. These were college students, and their scheme quickly unraveled. They made the classic mistake of boasting about their plan to too many people. Word eventually reached the authorities, and the FBI was waiting. The students were arrested before they could ever issue their demand, their grand heist ending not with a payoff but with a court date. The Sears Tower ransom plot stands as a monument to youthful nerve, a crime that was more conceptual art than criminal masterpiece. It forces us to wonder, what is the true value of an idea? Can you really put a price on a blueprint, or was this always a fantasy built on a foundation of pure, naive ambition? A pizza delivery driver and an armored car supervisor might seem like an unlikely criminal duo, but in 1997 they proved to be a dangerously effective combination. The Loomis Fargo Regional Vault in Charlotte, North Carolina, held millions, and its supervisor, David Gant, had the keys. Gant was a seemingly ordinary employee, but he was secretly persuaded by a former co-worker, Kelly Campbell, who now managed a pizza restaurant. Their plan was brazenly simple. On the night of the theft, Gant was alone inside the vault, a routine part of his job. This time, however, he was not there to guard the money but to steal it. He spent hours loading over $17 million in used, non-sequential bills into a company truck. He then drove the vehicle to a remote storage unit where Campbell and her new boyfriend, Steve Chambers, were waiting. The three of them transferred the staggering haul of cash, and Gant then abandoned the truck to make it look like an outside job. His role was over, and he immediately fled to Mexico, intending to live quietly in hiding until the heat died down when his partners would supposedly send for him. The scheme, however, began to collapse almost immediately. The sheer scale of the theft triggered a massive investigation, but the real undoing was the behavior of the conspirators back in North Carolina. Steve Chambers, who had received a mere $35,000 cut for his role, began spending the money with jaw-dropping extravagance. He and his wife purchased a $700,000 mansion, multiple new cars, and a grand piano, all while remaining on the radar of the very authorities hunting for the missing millions. Their sudden, flamboyant wealth was a glaring red flag. Meanwhile, in Mexico, David Gant was growing increasingly isolated and paranoid, calling his accomplices repeatedly and waiting for the escape money that never came. The conspirators, realizing Gant was a liability, had no intention of bringing him home. In a shocking twist, they began plotting to have him murdered in Mexico to permanently silence him. But the FBI was already closing in, having connected the Chambers spending spree to the heist. They tracked Gant down and arrested him before any harm could come to him. In the end, nearly all of the money was recovered, and more than 20 people were convicted. The Loomis Fargo theft serves as a darkly comic lesson in criminal mismanagement, proving that a perfect plan is worthless if the people executing it cannot resist the temptation to immediately flaunt their ill-gotten gains. How could a team capable of such a clean theft be so utterly incapable of handling the aftermath? The answer lies not in the crime itself, but in the corrosive nature of sudden, unearned fortune. A desperate craving for dessert can sometimes lead to criminal absurdity. In the small town of Baker City, Oregon, the days leading up to Thanksgiving in 2013 were a busy time for the local bakery. The staff worked tirelessly, baking hundreds of pies to meet the holiday demand. But on the morning of November 26th, the owners arrived to a scene of peculiar devastation. The bakery had been broken into, but the thieves had ignored the cash register and the valuable equipment. Their target was far more specific. 50 freshly baked pies were gone, vanished into the night. The haul included every classic flavor, apple, pumpkin, and pecan, representing a significant portion of the bakery's holiday inventory. For a small business, this was not a trivial loss. It was a financial blow that ruined their busiest sales week of the year. The crime seemed both petty and deeply personal, an attack on the community's very sense of comfort and tradition. Who would steal 50 pies? The answer arrived with a combination of farce and frontier justice. A local resident, alert after hearing about the bizarre burglary, noticed something suspicious at a nearby home. There, in plain sight, were stacks of pie boxes, clearly marked with the bakery's logo. The police were called, and they discovered the culprits, two men who had apparently decided to host their own Thanksgiving feast by any means necessary. They were caught, quite literally, with pie on their faces, surrounded by the evidence of their gluttonous crime. The Great Pie Heist was solved not by complex forensics, but by the simple fact that stolen pie is very difficult to hide. This was a theft driven not by greed for money, but by a hunger for homemade dessert, a strangely wholesome motivation for a genuinely damaging crime. It makes you wonder, at what point does a desperate craving cross the line into outright foolishness? And how does a community react when its holiday traditions are literally eaten by thieves? While pie thieves were caught by their own lack of discretion, a far more sophisticated criminal was quietly casing one of Boston's most revered institutions. In March of 1966, a well-dressed man identifying himself as a Swiss watch scholar gained access to the horology collection at the Museum of Fine Arts. He was polite, knowledgeable, and appeared utterly legitimate, spending hours studying the priceless display cases. He asked all the right questions, earning the trust of the curators who were pleased to share their passion with such an enthusiastic visitor. This careful reconnaissance was the first step in a heist of breathtaking focus. A few nights later, the same man returned alone, bypassing the museum's security with an expertise that suggested deep familiarity. He went directly to the collection he had so admired and proceeded to empty the cases, taking not just a handful of items, but 289 rare and antique watches. The haul was a curator's nightmare, a comprehensive theft of irreplaceable history. Pieces from legendary makers like Breguet and Tompion vanished, their combined value soaring into the millions. The thief had not been after a quick score. He was a connoisseur of crime, selecting a specific and incredibly difficult category of items to fence. The art world was stunned less by the brute force of the robbery and more by its surgical precision. This was not a smash and grab, it was a curated removal. How does one even begin to sell such uniquely identifiable treasures on the black market? The answer remains largely a mystery, as most of the watches were never recovered. The theft exposed a chilling reality that the greatest threat to a museum is not always a masked burglar, but a polite and patient scholar with a hidden agenda. The quiet, hallowed warehouses of the Buffalo Trace distillery held a liquid treasure more sought after than most jewels. For years, a conspiracy operated in plain sight, turning the scarcity of rare bourbon into a criminal enterprise. Between 2008 and 2013, a network of insiders orchestrated one of the most brazen thefts in the history of American spirits. Their target was not just any whiskey, but the legendary Pappy Van Winkle, a bourbon so rare and coveted that bottles can sell for thousands of dollars on the secondary market. The scheme was deceptively simple, which was the key to its longevity. It began with Gilbert Kurtzinger, a distillery worker with access to the very barrels everyone wanted. He did not need to stage a dramatic break-in. Instead, he and his accomplices allegedly used their insider knowledge to simply take bottles and even entire barrels, smuggling them out over time. This was not a single heist, but a slow, systematic bleed of the distillery's most precious inventory. The stolen bourbon was then funneled into a sophisticated resale ring, a shadow distribution network that included other law enforcement officers, business owners, and even a local sheriff's deputy. The conspiracy expanded beyond Pappy Van Winkle to include other premium brands from Buffalo Trace, with the total value of the stolen spirits reaching into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. How did they get away with it for so long? They exploited a simple truth in an environment built on trust and tradition. Who would suspect that the keepers of the barrel were quietly draining it? The scheme finally unraveled not through distillery security, but through an unrelated investigation into a stolen drug patch, which led authorities to stumble upon a trove of stolen bourbon in Kurtzinger's home. The resulting arrest sent shockwaves through the tight-knit world of bourbon enthusiasts, revealing a profound betrayal at the source of one of America's most iconic drinks. This heist poses a difficult question when a product's value is built on its exclusivity. Does that very demand not create the perfect conditions for the people closest to it to become its greatest threat? The slow bleed of rare bourbon reveals a crime of greed, but some thefts target something utterly irreplaceable, the sacred peace of the dead. In 2005, a Chicago funeral home became the stage for a crime that shocked the city with its profound cruelty. Thieves broke into the building's storage area not to steal cash or valuables, but to take the coffin containing the body of a 77-year-old man who had just passed away. They left everything else untouched, their focus solely on the casket and its occupant. The motive became horrifyingly clear when the grieving family received a phone call. The thieves were not vandals, they were extortionists demanding a ransom for the return of their loved one's body. The emotional calculation was as simple as it was depraved. They knew a family in mourning would pay anything to ensure a dignified burial. This was not a heist for profit in any conventional sense. It was a predatory attack on human vulnerability, holding a soul's final resting place for ransom. The police worked quickly, and within days they tracked the stolen coffin to an abandoned garage on the city's south side. The body was recovered, but the psychological damage to the family was immeasurable. How does a person descend to the point of viewing a coffin as a commodity? This macabre theft stripped crime down to its most vile essence, proving that the most terrifying target is not what we own, but who we love even after they are gone. The profound violation of a coffin finds a strange parallel in the theft of a soul captured on canvas. In 1972, the Huntington Library in San Marino, California, was the serene home to one of the most beloved paintings in America, Thomas Gainsborough's The Blue Boy. This iconic portrait of a youth in a brilliant blue satin suit was not just a masterpiece, it was a cultural touchstone, often called the Mona Lisa of the West. Its security, however, was shockingly relaxed for a work of such immense fame. One quiet morning, a lone individual walked into the gallery, approached the painting, and with a simple blade, sliced the canvas directly from its heavy, ornate frame. He then rolled up the centuries-old artwork, tucked it under his arm, and simply strolled out of the building. There were no screaming alarms, no frantic guards, just the quiet disappearance of an irreplaceable treasure. The theft was not discovered until a museum guard noticed the empty frame, a silent, gaping accusation. The thief's demands soon followed, a ransom of $250,000 for the painting's safe return. Yet this was not a negotiation conducted by a master criminal. The communications were clumsy, filled with unrealistic instructions and impossible deadlines. The authorities, led by the FBI, played along, stringing the thief along while following every lead. The ransom was never paid. Instead, just over a month after the painting vanished, police received an anonymous tip leading them to a public storage locker in the nearby city of Altadena. Inside, carefully stored and miraculously unharmed, was the Blue Boy. The thief was never caught, his identity and his motives swallowed by time. Was this an act of obsession, a bizarre attempt at profit, or simply the work of someone who believed they could possess beauty by force? The recovery of the painting was a national relief, but the crime itself exposed a terrifying vulnerability. It proved that the greatest art in the world could be stolen not by a sophisticated syndicate, but by a single person with a knife and the nerve to walk out the front door. While the theft of a single painting relied on nerve, the robbery of a Brinks depot demanded the cold discipline of a military operation. For nearly 2 years, an 11-man crew studied the armored car company's fortress in the heart of Boston's North End. They tracked the movements of the guards, memorized their schedules, and even made wax impressions of the building's locks. Their leader, a career criminal named Tony Pino, orchestrated every detail with painstaking precision. The night of January 17, 1950, was chosen for its perfect conditions, a cold, foggy evening that would obscure their activities. The men, dressed in navy blue coats and chauffeurs' caps to mimic the Brinks uniforms, slipped into the building using their coppered keys. They moved with ghostly silence, surprising 5 employees who were counting the day's receipts. The thieves did not fire a single shot, instead using their overwhelming numbers and the threat of violence to tie and gag the workers. In a stunningly efficient 30 minutes, they loaded over $1.2 million in cash and $1.5 million in checks and money orders into bags, a total haul of $2.7 million, the largest cash robbery in American history at that time. Then they vanished back into the fog, leaving behind no fingerprints and no immediate clues. The perfection of the crime sent shockwaves through the nation. How could such an immense fortune be stolen from one of the most secure facilities without a single trace? For nearly 6 years, the case remained a complete mystery, a frustrating blank for the FBI. The answer to that question was not found in a forensic breakthrough, but in the slow, corrosive decay of trust among thieves. The immense success of the heist became its own undoing. The crew had sworn a blood oath of silence, but the promise of that much money created festering jealousies and paranoia. One member, Specs O'Keefe, felt he was being cheated out of his full share and began making threats. Fearing he would talk, the rest of the gang reportedly turned against him, even hiring a hitman in a failed attempt to silence him permanently. This betrayal broke the oath. Facing prison on another charge and fearing for his life, O'Keefe decided to talk. In 1956, he walked into the FBI office and laid out the entire intricate plot, naming every member of the crew. His testimony led to the arrest and conviction of the men who had executed the so-called perfect crime. The Great Brinks robbery stands as a monumental lesson in criminal logistics, a heist so well planned it was nearly flawless. Yet its ultimate failure reveals a profound truth, that the most sophisticated plan is only as strong as the loyalty of the people who carry it out. When the bonds of greed finally snapped, the entire house of cards came tumbling down. The meticulous planning of the Great Brinks robbery stands in stark contrast to a theft born from youthful impulse and artistic admiration. In 1955, Konstantin Brancusi's shimmering bronze sculpture, Bird in Space, stood on display at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Its sleek, abstract form represented the very pinnacle of modern art, a piece valued not just for its metal but for its revolutionary vision. One evening, a group of students from an Ivy League university, after what was likely a night of spirited discussion and perhaps a few drinks, conceived of a daring prank. They saw the sculpture not as an untouchable masterpiece, but as a challenge, an object of such pure form that it seemed to beg for liberation. With a mixture of audacity and naivete, they managed to slip the slender, 5-foot-tall bronze from its pedestal and carry it out of the museum, wrapping it in a blanket to disguise its distinctive shape. Their initial triumph, however, was quickly replaced by a dawning and terrifying reality. This was not a simple collegiate stunt, it was the theft of a world-famous work of art, a crime plastered across every newspaper and triggering a citywide police hunt. The gravity of their actions settled heavily upon them. They were not hardened criminals, but young men who had crossed a line without fully understanding the consequences. The sculpture, once a trophy, became a hot, incriminating burden. Realizing they had no way to profit from it and no desire to destroy it, they chose the only honorable exit from their self-made predicament. A few days after the theft, museum staff arrived to find Bird in space carefully, anonymously returned. It was left leaning against a wall in a basement storage area, completely undamaged. The students had pulled off the perfect prank heist, only to discover that the most difficult part of any crime is not the taking, but the keeping of a stolen dream. How does a night of reckless adventure transform into a lesson in profound responsibility? This bizarre caper lives on as a strange footnote in art history, a theft where the value of the art was not in its price tag, but in the sobering lesson it taught the thieves themselves. The immense success of the Lufthansa heist carried a poison pill, transforming a perfect score into a bloody curse. The mastermind, Jimmy Burke, was suddenly sitting on a mountain of untraceable cash, but he was also surrounded by men who knew his secret. In the criminal underworld, such knowledge is a terminal liability. A chilling paranoia set in immediately. The solution was as brutal as it was simple, systematic elimination. One by one, the participants and their associates began to disappear. Tommy DeSimone, one of the key players, was lured to a supposed celebration only to be executed. Marty Krugman, who had helped plan the score and was incessantly asking for his cut, vanished without a trace, his body never found. Even the cargo worker who provided the inside information, Joe Manry, was murdered. The killings were not acts of hot-headed rage, but cold, calculated decisions to erase any link back to the money. The very bonds of loyalty that made the heist possible were now being severed with bullets and shovels. How does a shared victory curdle into a death warrant for almost everyone who touched it? The Lufthansa aftermath presents a grim paradox, a crime so successful that its only logical conclusion was the annihilation of its own architects. It forces a haunting question: can you ever truly enjoy a fortune that is paid for not just in risk, but in the blood of your closest allies? The legend of D.B. Cooper is a puzzle with pieces that refuse to fit. Decades after that stormy night, the FBI has investigated over 1,000 suspects, yet the man's true identity remains a ghost. Was he a skilled parachutist who executed a perfect landing and disappeared into a new life? Or was he an amateur who tragically perished in the unforgiving wilderness, his body and money lost to the elements? The most tantalizing clues surfaced years later. In 1980, a young boy named Brian Ingram, while building a campfire along the banks of the Columbia River, unearthed 3 bundles of weathered $20 bills. The serial numbers matched the ransom money exactly. This discovery proved that at least a portion of the cash had survived the jump, but it raised more questions than it answered. How did the money end up there? Did it wash ashore from the river, suggesting Cooper drowned? Or was it deliberately buried, a cryptic clue left by the skyjumper himself? Theories have swirled for over 50 years, pointing fingers at everyone from a disgruntled aerospace employee to a retired cop with a mysterious past. Some researchers even believe he may have been a man named Richard Floyd McCoy, a convicted skyjacker who pulled a nearly identical heist just months later. Yet no theory has ever held enough water to officially close the case. The FBI suspended its active investigation in 2016, leaving the file forever open. This enduring mystery taps into a fundamental human desire, the hope that someone can truly beat the system, vanish without a trace, and become nothing but a story. Why does the idea of a man who got away with it continue to captivate us so completely? And what does that say about our own secret dreams of escape? The empty frames at the Gardner Museum are not just a memorial, they are an active crime scene frozen in time. For over 3 decades, these blank spaces on the wall have served as a silent, stubborn accusation, a daily reminder of a wound that has never healed. The investigation has been a roller coaster of tantalizing hope and crushing disappointment. Authorities have chased leads from Boston to Philadelphia, from the mob to a secret European collection. They have scrutinized dozens of names, from small-time criminals to notorious art thieves, yet each path has ultimately led to a dead end. The $10 million reward for information leading to the art's recovery has generated thousands of tips, but so far not one has panned out. This immense unclaimed bounty speaks to the profound silence surrounding the case. Did the thieves panic and destroy the art, or are the paintings hidden away, their beauty a secret for a single collector? The museum's commitment to leaving the frames empty is a powerful statement of faith, a belief that one day Rembrandt's storm-tossed sea and Vermeer's quiet concert will return home. This enduring mystery forces us to confront a difficult reality, that some losses are so profound their absence becomes a permanent part of the landscape, a ghostly echo of beauty that was stolen away. That single stack of crisp $100 bills was the thread that unraveled everything. The Dunbar crew had successfully hidden an $18.9 million secret for over a year, but they could not hide their own sudden wealth. The first and most spectacular failure was Steve Chambers, who received a relatively small cut of the loot but spent it with the subtlety of a fireworks display. He and his wife moved from their modest apartment into a $700,000 mansion, complete with a grand piano they could not play. They bought multiple new luxury cars and indulged in every possible luxury, all while remaining under the intense scrutiny of an ongoing federal investigation. Their spending was a glaring beacon, drawing the FBI's attention directly to their doorstep, but the fatal mistake belonged to another member of the crew, Eugene Price. Price's downfall was not his spending, but a moment of pure arrogance during a routine traffic stop. When an officer pulled him over, Price decided to try and bribe his way out of the ticket. He casually offered the officer a thick stack of $100 bills. The officer, immediately suspicious, noted that the money was brand new and, most damningly, still bound with the distinctive, brightly colored security straps used by the Dunbar Armored Company. That one foolish act connected the dots for investigators in an instant. The bribe attempt gave the FBI a direct, undeniable link between the flamboyant spenders and the stolen cash from the depot. Agents now had a clear path to follow, and they began surveillance on the entire group, watching as they met, communicated, and continued to live far beyond their known means. The investigation swiftly closed in, leading to arrests and the recovery of nearly all the stolen money. The Dunbar heist's collapse was a masterclass in human error, proving that a perfect plan is utterly worthless if the people involved cannot manage the one thing they stole it all for, the money itself. For 6 long years, the Great Brinks robbery was a perfect, unbroken mystery. The FBI chased countless false leads, from shadowy informants to complex theories, but every path dissolved into dead ends. The thieves had left behind no forensic evidence, no reliable witnesses, and no trace of the massive fortune. The case grew so cold it seemed it might never be solved. Then, a legal technicality created a bizarre race against time. The statute of limitations for the crime of robbery was set to expire in January of 1956. This meant that after that date, even if the perpetrators were identified, they could no longer be charged with the actual theft. The pressure on investigators was immense, as the masterminds of the perfect crime were on the verge of achieving permanent legal immunity. The breakthrough, however, came from an entirely different direction, one steeped in the gang's own violent unraveling. A key member of the crew, Joseph O'Keefe, known as Specs, had fallen out with the others over his share of the money. His constant demands and threats made him a liability in the eyes of the gang's leader, Tony Pino. In a shocking move, Pino and his associates reportedly hired a hitman to murder O'Keefe, silencing him permanently. The assassination attempt failed, leaving O'Keefe wounded but alive, and now he was running for his life from his former partners. Facing a separate charge for a different crime and realizing his own crew wanted him dead, O'Keefe made a desperate decision. He walked into the FBI office and offered them everything. His confession was the key that finally unlocked the entire 6-year-old puzzle. He named every single participant, detailed the meticulous planning, and revealed the inner workings of the heist. With his testimony, the FBI finally had the evidence they needed to make arrests. Just days before the statute of limitations was set to expire, 8 of the 11 robbers were captured and charged. They could not be tried for the robbery itself, but they were convicted of other federal crimes, including conspiracy, and received lengthy prison sentences. The perfect crime was ultimately solved not by a clue from the heist, but by the violent paranoia it created among the thieves themselves. How fragile is a criminal's code of honor when it is tested not by poverty or pressure, but by the overwhelming weight of their own success? The true brilliance of the Kentucky bourbon theft ring lay in its invisibility. Gilbert Kurtzinger did not need to crack a safe or disable an alarm. He simply exploited the natural rhythm of the distillery itself. His role as a trusted employee gave him intimate knowledge of the entire distribution chain, from the aging warehouses to the final shipping logs. He knew exactly when rare barrels were moved, which bottles were allocated to specific buyers, and most importantly, he understood the culture of trust that allowed the whole operation to function. The thefts were not dramatic raids, but quiet, patient withdrawals. A few cases of Pappy Van Winkle would disappear from a pallet destined for a high-end retailer. An entire barrel marked for a special private selection would be quietly rerouted and replaced with an empty 101 filled with a far less valuable spirit. The paperwork would be subtly altered, the digital records sometimes adjusted to show the missing inventory as a legitimate transfer or a simple accounting error. In an environment where scarcity is part of the marketing, a few missing bottles here and there could easily be dismissed as a logistical hiccup or an unavoidable loss, not a systematic criminal enterprise. This was a heist that mimicked the natural entropy of a large business, hiding its crimes in plain sight by making them look like ordinary, everyday problems. But where did all this stolen liquid gold go? The black market for rare bourbon was the perfect engine for the crime. The incredible demand for brands like Pappy Van Winkle created a shadow economy where collectors and speculators were willing to pay astronomical prices, no questions asked. Kurtzinger's network acted as a ghost distributor. The stolen bottles and barrels were funneled through a web of accomplices that included other law enforcement officers, business owners, and local figures who provided both legitimacy and distribution channels. The bourbon would appear at private parties, be sold out of the back rooms of bars, or be offered to a select group of wealthy clients who knew better than to inquire about its origins. The very qualities that made the bourbon so valuable, its limited availability and its legendary status, were the same things that made it impossible to trace once it left the distillery. How do you track a bottle that is supposed to be almost mythical? The ring operated for years because they were not just stealing whiskey, they were harvesting a legend and selling it back to the people who coveted it most. This sophisticated operation reveals a dark truth about luxury, that the more exclusive something becomes, the more it incentivizes the people closest to it to become its most cunning thieves. The emotional toll of that crime was immediate and devastating. For the family, the initial shock of their father's death was brutally compounded by the theft, transforming their grief into a waking nightmare. Instead of planning a funeral, they were now fielding calls from extortionists who saw their profound loss as a financial opportunity. Every silent phone was a source of dread, and every ring brought a fresh wave of fear and anger. The media seized upon the story, broadcasting the bizarre details across the nation and turning a private tragedy into a public spectacle. Reporters camped outside the funeral home, their cameras and microphones amplifying the family's humiliation and pain. This was not just a theft, it was a double violation, first of a body and then of the sacred private space of mourning. The perpetrators calculated that a family's love would override their judgment, that they would pay any price to ensure their loved one was laid to rest with dignity. This chilling logic reveals a depth of cruelty that goes beyond simple greed, targeting the very bonds that hold families together. Thankfully, the resolution came swiftly. An intensive police investigation, fueled by public outrage, located the stolen coffin within days, abandoned in a dusty garage. The recovery brought a grim closure, but it could never erase the psychological scars. The family had their loved one back, but the memory of those agonizing days would forever taint their period of grief. This heist forces us to ask a difficult question. What kind of person looks at a coffin and sees only a bargaining chip? It stands as a stark reminder that the most valuable things in life have no price tag, and that the most despicable crimes are often those that steal our peace instead of our property. The ransom notes that began arriving were as clumsy as the theft itself. The thief demanded $250,000 for the safe return of the blue boy, but his instructions were a study in amateurish confusion. He proposed a series of convoluted drop locations and communication methods, often setting impossible deadlines that came and went without further word. One note allegedly insisted the money be delivered to a specific phone booth, which the FBI quickly discovered did not even exist. The entire negotiation felt less like a professional criminal transaction and more like a desperate, poorly planned improvisation. The federal agents assigned to the case decided on a simple strategy. They would play along, stringing the anxious thief along while buying precious time to investigate. They responded to his messages, showing a willingness to cooperate, all the while using the communications to narrow down his location and profile. They never had any intention of paying the ransom, believing correctly that the thief was in over his head and had no viable way to sell the famously recognizable painting. The pressure was immense. Every passing day increased the risk that the thief would panic and destroy the centuries-old masterpiece. How do you negotiate with a ghost who cannot even manage his own demand? The FBI's patience and psychological maneuvering ultimately paid off. Just over a month after the painting vanished, an anonymous tip led police to a public storage locker in a neighboring city. Inside, carefully wrapped and completely unharmed, was Gainsborough's iconic blue boy. The thief had simply abandoned his prize, his ransom fantasy collapsing under the weight of its own impracticality. He was never identified or caught, leaving behind a lingering question. Was this the work of an obsessive fan who wanted to possess the painting, or simply a foolish man who thought he could mastermind a crime for which he had no real talent? Ambition can sometimes outpace wisdom, especially when the target is the world's tallest building. In 1969, as the Sears Tower began its climb over the Chicago skyline, a group of University of Kansas architecture students hatched a plan of staggering audacity. They were not after cash or jewels, but the very soul of the structure, its architectural blueprints. Their logic was as simple as it was bizarre. They believed the blueprints were so vital to the project that the architects, Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, would pay a $1 million ransom to get them back. How could a group of students possibly get their hands on such sensitive documents? They relied on a surprising advantage. One of their own was interning at the architectural firm. This inside man reportedly smuggled out key documents piece by piece over several weeks, building their illicit collection. The plan was to assemble the complete set and then make their ransom demand, holding the design of a skyscraper hostage. But this was not the plot of a slick Hollywood thriller. These were college students, and their scheme quickly unraveled. They made the classic mistake of boasting about their plan to too many people. Word eventually reached the authorities, and the FBI was waiting. The students were arrested before they could ever issue their demand, their grand heist ending not with a payoff but with a court date. The Sears Tower ransom plot stands as a monument to youthful nerve, a crime that was more conceptual art than criminal masterpiece. It forces us to wonder, what is the true value of an idea? Can you really put a price on a blueprint, or was this always a fantasy built on a foundation of pure, naive ambition? David Gant's new life in Mexico was built on a foundation of sand. With a new name and a modest stash of cash, he settled in the coastal town of Playa del Carmen, trying to blend into the expatriate community. For a few months, he lived the fantasy he had imagined, a quiet existence far from the frantic investigation back in North Carolina. He worked odd jobs, learned a little Spanish, and walked along the beach, a man supposedly free. But freedom is a fragile state when you are utterly alone and constantly looking over your shoulder. His connection to his old life was a thin, fraying thread, the phone calls he made to his accomplices back home. He was waiting for his share of the real fortune, the money that would allow him to disappear forever. Each call, however, grew more strained. The answers were evasive, the promises hollow. The paranoia that gnaws at every fugitive began to consume him. He was not just hiding from the FBI, he was now a liability to the very people who had promised him a future. Back in the United States, his former partners were not planning a wire transfer, they were plotting his murder. Steve Chambers and his crew, living in their new mansion and spending recklessly, saw Gant as the one loose end that could unravel their entire world. In a chilling betrayal, they began making inquiries, trying to hire a hitman to travel to Mexico and permanently silence their former friend. They were willing to pay for a murder with the money he had helped them steal. The FBI, however, was already listening. Their investigation into the Chambers family's sudden wealth had led them to tap phones and monitor communications. They heard the entire conspiracy unfolding, the cold discussion of a contract killing. Federal agents now had two missions: solve the heist and save the life of the man who had carried it out. They moved quickly, tracking Gant to a supermarket in Mexico where he was working. In a coordinated operation with Mexican authorities, they surrounded him and took him into custody without a struggle. The look on his face was not one of defiance, but of profound relief. The man who had stolen millions was ultimately rescued by the police from his own partners. His subsequent cooperation sealed the fate of the entire crew, turning their multi-million-dollar dream into a collective nightmare. How does it feel to realize the people you trusted with your freedom have instead purchased a ticket for your death? The theft of 50 pies ignited a firestorm far beyond the bakery's doors. In a community like Baker City, such a crime was not merely a statistic, it was a personal affront to every family planning their Thanksgiving dinner. Outrage was immediate and vocal, with residents flooding social media and local news outlets with messages of support for the bakery and condemnation for the thieves. This was not just about pastries, it was about the violation of a shared tradition, a direct attack on the town's identity. The police investigation, while earnest, took on an almost folksy character. They followed the most literal of clues, the crumbs, so to speak. An alert citizen, acting on the shared sense of community vigilance, noticed the suspicious accumulation of pie boxes at a nearby residence and made the crucial call. The police response was swift, leading them to the two men surrounded by the delicious, damning evidence. The story quickly morphed from a tale of loss to one of small-town justice, a narrative where everyone looked out for one another. When the culprits faced sentencing, the court considered the full impact of their actions. The theft had caused significant financial harm to a small business during its most critical sales period. The men were ultimately convicted and sentenced to probation, community service, and most fittingly, were ordered to pay full restitution to the bakery for the stolen goods and lost revenue. This resolution perfectly blended the consequences of crime with the restorative power of local values. The thieves were not sent to a distant prison, but were made to directly repair the damage they had done to the community they had wronged. It serves as a poignant reminder that the true cost of a crime is not always measured in dollars, but in the trust and traditions that are broken, and that sometimes the most effective justice is the kind that forces you to rebuild what you have taken. The theft of nearly 300 watches did more than just empty museum cases. It fundamentally rewrote the rules of museum security. Before this brazen heist, many institutions operated on a principle of trust, relying on basic alarms and the watchful eyes of guards. The realization that a single, polite individual could so thoroughly undermine their defenses sent a shockwave through the entire cultural world. Museums everywhere conducted urgent security reviews, leading to a revolution in protective technology. Simple locks gave way to sophisticated pressure sensors, motion detectors were integrated with high-definition surveillance systems, and climate-controlled cases were reinforced with shatterproof glass. The very philosophy of displaying priceless artifacts shifted, moving away from open accessibility and toward a new, more guarded relationship with the public. This was the birth of modern museum security, a necessary but unfortunate barrier born from a single act of theft. Despite these global changes and decades of investigation, the vast majority of those 289 watches remain missing. They are not forgotten. Each one meticulously catalogued on the FBI's permanent stolen art list, a digital wanted poster for objects of immense historical and artistic value. The few that have surfaced tell a fragmented story. One rare piece was discovered in a private collection after the owner attempted to have it serviced by a suspicious watchmaker. Another was found in a safety deposit box following an unrelated financial crime. But these are the rare exceptions. The rest have simply vanished into the shadowy collector's market, where they are likely held by individuals who value their secret possession more than their cultural significance. How does nearly 3 centuries of horological history simply disappear? The enduring mystery of the missing watches serves as a permanent, ticking reminder that some losses are so profound they force the entire world to change how it protects its treasures. That moment of discovery must have been a special kind of agony. After the adrenaline rush of a flawless execution, after the frantic escape and the celebration of a multi-million-dollar score, the Brinks-Mat thieves finally opened their secure boxes. Their triumph curdled into disbelief, then fury, as they stared at stacks of perfectly crafted paper replicas. This was not a fortune, it was a corporate training exercise, a collection of worthless fakes. The psychological impact was devastating. Imagine the humiliation of realizing that every risk they took, every second of meticulous planning, was rendered absurd by a company that was simply running a drill. Their anger was not just about the lost money, it was about the profound insult to their professional pride. They had been outsmarted not by a rival gang or a brilliant detective, but by a faceless corporation's contingency plan. In the criminal underworld, reputation is everything, and this failure was a stain that could not be washed away. The fallout was immediate and dangerous. A crew that fails so spectacularly becomes a liability. Trust among the members would have shattered, with accusations of incompetence and internal betrayal flying. The sheer public embarrassment of the caper, once it became known, would have made them a laughingstock, undermining their standing and making future scores infinitely more difficult. How do you recover from a heist that never actually happened, a crime that turned you into the punchline of your own joke? This bizarre twist of fate serves as a stark lesson in criminal psychology, proving that the most demoralizing defeat is not always delivered by a police bullet, but by the quiet, mocking reality of a perfect fake. This bizarre footnote to a major disaster reveals a stunning human duality. The Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919 was a catastrophic engineering failure, a wave of syrup moving with the force of a freight train that decimated a waterfront neighborhood. The sheer destructive power was immense, crushing buildings and infrastructure, and the human cost was heartbreaking, with 21 lives lost and over 150 people injured. The clean-up was a monumental task, a weeks-long struggle against a sticky, suffocating residue that permeated everything. It was in this landscape of tragedy and ruin that the looting occurred. The grim irony is almost overwhelming. While rescue workers and city officials were battling a public health crisis and recovering the dead, a separate, opportunistic activity was taking place in the shadows. The very warehouses that had been shattered by the flood held damaged but still valuable barrels of molasses. For the looters, this was not a scene of horror but a windfall. They saw the chaos as a cover, a chance to siphon the thick, spilled syrup for their own profit. Their actions highlight a chilling disconnect, the ability to view a community's profound loss as a personal financial opportunity. How does such a mindset take hold in the midst of shared suffering? This peculiar heist forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth, that even in the face of overwhelming tragedy, the temptation for an easy score can override basic human decency, turning a sweet substance into a symbol of both disaster and disgrace. Panic is a quiet, cold thing when it happens in a silk gown. For the wealthy socialites and industrialists bound and gagged in their suites at the Pierre Hotel, the New Year's celebration had curdled into a waking nightmare. These were people accustomed to absolute control over their environment, now rendered completely helpless by men who moved with the quiet confidence of maitre d's. The thieves, led by the charismatic Bobby Comfort, were not brutes, they were psychological tacticians. They understood that their greatest weapon was not the gun, but the profound shock of the invasion itself. One guest, a prominent financier, was reportedly forced to watch as the thieves emptied his wife's jewel case, selecting only the most valuable pieces with an appraiser's eye. The humiliation was as acute as the fear, a dual violation of their safety and their status. The thieves' calm was unnerving, their politeness almost more terrifying than threats would have been. They worked with a quiet efficiency that suggested this was not a crime of desperation, but a business transaction. For nearly 2 hours, they moved through the gilded halls, treating the entire 5-star hotel as their personal showroom, leaving behind a trail of terrified, trussed-up millionaires. The long-term impact of this social violation was immediate and permanent. Luxury hotels worldwide were forced to confront a terrifying new reality. Their greatest asset, an atmosphere of exclusive, open comfort, was also their greatest vulnerability. The era of simple locks and trusting nods was over. The Pierre robbery sparked a security revolution in the hospitality industry, leading to the widespread installation of electronic keycard systems, discreet panic buttons in suites, and far more rigorous screening of staff and guests. The very concept of luxury had to be redefined, now inextricably linked with invisible yet impenetrable layers of protection. How do you sell an experience of effortless elegance when you must first build a fortress to protect it? The ghosts of that New Year's Eve forced a difficult balance, proving that true luxury, after such a brazen heist, must always include the peace of mind that can never be stolen. That hidden tunnel was a masterpiece of criminal engineering. The team behind the Dr. X heist did not simply dig a hole. They constructed a subterranean passage that rivaled professional mining operations. Its walls were shored up with sturdy wooden beams to prevent a collapse, and a custom ventilation system piped in fresh air, allowing the thieves to work for hours without detection. Their most crucial tool was a military-grade thermal lance, a device that uses a superheated jet of flame to slice through reinforced concrete and steel. This advanced piece of equipment allowed them to silently burn through the thick foundation of the vault, a barrier the bank's designers believed was impenetrable from below. By attacking from this unexpected angle, they completely bypassed a fortress of alarms, motion sensors, and pressure plates that guarded every conventional entrance. The entire operation was a testament to meticulous planning and technical skill, turning the earth beneath the bank from a shield into a secret highway. This audacious feat sent a shockwave through the security industry, forcing a fundamental rethink of how to protect financial institutions. Vaults were no longer just rooms, they were three-dimensional spaces that needed to be secured from every possible vector, including the ground below. How do you defend against an enemy who treats your multi-million-dollar security system as a mere suggestion and simply goes underneath it? the Dr. X caper became a dark legend, a case study that inspired both criminals to dream bigger and security experts to build deeper, proving that the only true defense against such ingenuity is to anticipate the unimaginable. From sticky molasses floods to priceless art vanishing from museum walls, these 33 stories reveal a stunning spectrum of criminal creativity. We have seen heists driven by desperation, by greed, and by the simple, baffling desire for 50 Thanksgiving pies. Each tale, from the tragically comic to the chillingly brilliant, shares a common thread of audacity, a willingness to look at the world and see not rules but opportunities. These are not just crimes, they are bizarre reflections of the American spirit itself, a mix of ingenuity, ambition, and a dash of sheer strangeness that defies simple explanation. What does it say about us that our history is dotted with schemes to ransom blueprints, steal gravy boats, and tunnel into bank vaults? Perhaps it reveals that the line between a foolish dream and a criminal masterpiece is thinner than we think. The human capacity for invention is boundless, and sometimes it simply takes a wrong turn. Now we turn the story over to you. Which of these unbelievable heists captured your imagination the most? Do you know of another strange, true crime tale from your own corner of America? Share your favorite story in the comments below, and let's keep unraveling the wonderfully weird history of the American heist.